risk and the confidence to actually kill somebody within feet and inches of neighbours rather than out here on the moors.
It would be another 10 months before Leslie Ann's body was discovered on the moors in a shallow grave with her clothing at her feet. Even with the damning evidence mounting against them, Brady and Hindley denied murdering Leslie Ann. As in the case of Edward Evans, they attempted to implicate David Smith. They claimed that Smith had brought the girl to the house so that Brady could photograph her. As far as they were concerned, Leslie Ann had left their house unharmed with Smith.
Ian Brady tried to protect Myra, and it's true that if Myra had played it the way he wanted it to, she would probably have been charged with being accessory and possibly been out of prison after 7 or 8 years. But she was determined that she was in this with Ian. All she said was, Ian is innocent and I am innocent, and she said this over and over again.
The evidence that linked Brady and Hindley to the murder of John Kilbride, while not as overwhelming, was sufficient to charge them. They found the name John Kilbride in Brady's handwriting, written in his notebook, and a photograph of Hindley on John's grave on the moors.
I actually got ready myself to go and help on the dig, and I was more or less locked in my bedroom by my father. A couple of days after the police came with a chute, my mum identified it as being John's, and they found John's body then.
Despite all their efforts, the police were unable to find the bodies of the other 2 missing children, or any evidence to link Brady and Hindley to their disappearance.
Ian Brady was charged with the 3 murders of the ones that the police had the bodies on. That was Leslie Ann Downey, John Kilbride, and Edward Evans. Myra was charged with Leslie Ann Downey and Edward Evans, and of being an accessory to the killing of John Kilbride. Ian Brady received 3 life sentences, and Myra received 2.
Myra was taken to Holloway Prison.
I put them all in a big enough hole to bury the bloody lot of them, throw acid on them, and then throw the soil on top of them and burn them alive, because that's all they need. Because them kind of people are not worth the salt of the earth, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
In order to evaluate the degree of influence Ian Brady had on Myra Hindley's criminality, you have to examine the point at which they were separated. Myra Hindley's behaviours will indicate whether or not he was the causal factor, or whether or not Myra Hindley was born to kill.
Over Myra Hindley continued for the first few years of their incarceration. They constantly wrote to each other and even requested permission to marry. The rift that developed between them was gradual, stemming mainly from their differing responses to their imprisonment. Brady quickly accepted his sentence and soon settled into prison life, whereas Hindley continued to assert her innocence, maintaining her claim that Brady and Smith were responsible for the murders.
Myra said she didn't have any involvement or me. In her words at the time, was acquiring the children for Ian Brady, but she was distinctly heard on the tape with Leslie Ann Downey telling the little girl to shut her mouth. Well, Brady was, God knows what he was doing to her.
Her mother was convinced she was innocent. Her sister was convinced she was innocent. Everybody around her was convinced by Myra that Myra had just been Ian Brady's dupe.
In Myra Hindley's mind, the story was in place regardless of her innocence, and she would gather together anyone who would listen, give her time, and certainly anyone who would give her any publicity that might support her plea of innocence.
In 1970, Hindley broke off all contact with Brady. His hold on her was completely broken by the realization that she would never see him again. 7 years later, more than 10 years after her imprisonment, Hindley began a campaign to win her freedom, a crusade that continued until the day she died. Hindley began a campaign to win her freedom, a crusade continued.
Well, he was willing to serve his sentence. At least he knew what he'd done. And Myra Hindley on a regular basis, just to tell his sons what he'd done.
Application was made for further criminal work. When Hindley fled his family home in 1985, he delivered his to
Had a long-term objective.
At the end of 1986, Hindley changed her tactics. Instead of continuing to plead her innocence, she made a full public confession.
A conjunction of people came together in Myra's life. She had a solicitor who was saying to her, unless you make a clean breast of everything, admit it, and then possibly down the line parole will be possible. At the same time, she was being counselled by Lord Longford to make a confession. She also received a letter from Winnie Johnson, the mother of Keith Bennett.
When I wrote to her, she said she was very sorry that she couldn't help me in any way. She was watching out for Brady on the hill. And she wasn't, she was as bad as him. She watched them kids murdered and she watched them being raped.
And at the same moment, because Ian Brady had made a sort of confession to a journalist, the Home Office ordered Greater Manchester Police to reopen the investigation.
Well, the aim was to review the case and see whether there were any fresh lines of inquiry we could pursue with a view to, first and foremost, finding out whether 2 children might have been buried, and secondly, of course, gaining confessions.
She now admitted both the knowledge of